Welcome to the Impact in Charlotte podcast, where we believe you need to show up to go up, grow yourself to grow your business and your community. In each episode, we highlight a member of II Charlotte, share their story, and talk impact. Today's guest is Michelle Jones, the founder of Michelle Jones Creative. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah, so we always begin with questions about the entrepreneurial journey, right? So you're the founder, so you started this company. Just give us a story or kind of how you got into it, like kind of what led you to leap into your own business.
Yeah, so I actually went to college for business entrepreneurship. Back before that was the cool thing to do, I guess, back in 2000 to 2004. There were 6 people in my program, so that shows you, I guess, the demand for entrepreneurship at that time. Everyone else was in marketing or finance, but my dad owned his own business my whole life, and I grew up seeing that, and that's what I wanted to do. So originally, I wanted to own an architecture business. So I went to grad school for architecture and then got into urban design with the government and figured out that wasn't for me. Was doing web design on the side, had been doing that, kind of dabbling in it since high school, and just decided to kind of leap and try my hand at owning my business and getting into web design. So
Yeah, it's interesting. So you went to grad school for architecture.
yeah.
Ended up in web design, but I would imagine there's some overlap there, right? So
Yeah, definitely.
So obviously you do web design now. Can you talk a little bit about all of us have websites. Websites are kind of a commonplace as opposed to something that used to be like, oh, you have a website, cool. Now It's kind of like, oh, you don't have a website? That would almost be shocking. So everybody kind of has one. But talk about kind of the importance of design and architecture and structure as it pertains to kind of how you tell your story through website.
Yeah. So, when it comes to your website, a lot of people think that the design is the most important piece. And I would say, actually, the strategy and the words on your website are far more important than the actual pretty part of the design. When someone lands on your website, you really want it to make an impact on them within like the first 3 to 5 seconds. And if your website's not doing that, then it's really not effective. So you really want to be conscientious of what you're saying to them within the first few seconds of when they're landing on your site, and how you're getting them to engage with you on your website.
Share some thoughts around that. Like what, you talked about kind of the first 3 seconds.
Yeah.
What are people looking for in the first 3 seconds? I mean, I'm sure industry specific, nuances, but if I'm visiting your website and I'm interested in web, like what's the quick hit 3-second kind of view that someone should be planning for?
Really, with any industry, people that are coming to your website, they want to know who you are, what you do, and how you can help them. So those are really the main 3 questions that you want to make sure you're answering within like that first 3 to 5 seconds. So you really want to be conscious of doing that in the least amount of words as possible, and telling your story in that way. But one thing people make a big mistake on is they go into their website and they go into the copywriting of their website talking about themselves, when people come to your website and they're really wanting to know what you can do for them, not what you do and your background. So you really want to make sure to communicate how you can help them and what that transformation is going to be that you're giving them. And I think that goes across any industry.
Yeah. So really the focus on, what's the problem that you solve for your customer, as opposed to check out my really cool story. Don't you like it?
Right. Yeah. I think people hear storytelling and they think, oh, well, this is my background and I did this in 1985 and here's where my business was in 1993 and that sort of thing. And that's not really what people care about. They want to know, how are you going to solve my problem and how are you going to do that, and what's the process to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really interesting because in some ways, what I hear you saying is it's not your story, it's your customer's story through your service or through your lens. Is that kind of?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, that's really interesting. Um, so when you're working with clients and you're like, how do you kind of pull that story out of people? I mean, I'm curious kind of what, as somebody who's created a website and, has my own, I'm curious kind of what, like, how would you work with me? Like, how would you help me kind of create that?
So one of the things I do when I first start working with a client is I have a pretty in-depth intake form that I give a client, and I ask them to really take the time to fill that out. And there's a lot of kind of brand awareness questions that I ask them. And that's where I do ask kind of what's the background of your company, what's your mission, what's your vision, and how do you help your customers, and what's the problem that you're trying to solve. Really, we want to try to get down into what makes you different than everyone else in your industry, and how can we identify that. Um, and I do that from the design and strategy perspective. And then I work with copywriters who do that through the copy and the wording on your website.
Okay. So, I mean, in some ways, actually, what you just said to me kind of blends the two channels of this conversation, right? Which is like, hey, there's the story. And then there's also like, how does that story get displayed?
Right.
Like, how does that story then kind of show up on your websites so that people see it, right? So talk a little bit about that, like how story, there's like a design element to the story. Like, let's craft the story, let's design the story. And then there's like the architecture of the website. Like, how do you blend those two things together?
When someone's coming to your website, you want to make sure that you're people don't have a lot of time. So you want to get that story across in the wording, but you also want to make sure you're um I guess getting them to contact you, or to take that action that you want them to take as quickly as possible. So you don't want to confuse them. You want to make it as easy as possible for them to get in touch with you, to purchase your product, whatever that action is that you want them to take. You want to make it very clear and very obvious. Whether that's a call to action button that's a different color, a bright color. We put those all over our websites for a reason, and multiple places on websites. A lot of people think, well, I already put it at the top, so I'm good. A lot of times people will overlook things on a website multiple times. People skim websites. Think about the way that you engage with a website. You don't read every word on a website. You don't even look at every element on a website. You're just kind of looking for the things that relate to you. So you really have to be repetitive on your website, and to really engage with people and get them to take action.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's really interesting, right? I'm geeking out a little bit. I'm like, no, tell me more, tell me more. And now you've got me percolating on, oh man, am I doing that on my own way? Like, you've got me questioning some things, which I think is good. But I really like that piece around, kind of pushing towards taking action.
Yeah.
Like, and how do you, encouraging people to do that? Because I mean, in some ways, like the point of the website is to get people to do something, right? Is that, and so, for me in kind of the business coaching perspective, like my website kind of operates as less as a selling tool, in the sense that like it's rarely the first time that somebody would engage with me. They might find me somewhere else and then go to my website to see if I'm legitimate or not, right? So
Right.
I kind of want to come back to that strategy piece you talked about of like, so taking, like, what do we want them to do? Like, what is the website for? And if you can just share a little bit about like, how should we think about the strategy side of it? Like, what is, how do you kind of coach us through strategy?
Well, when you're looking at strategy, you want to really identify what the purpose is, that your clients or customers are coming to your website. And that's really different across every industry and every business. For example, in my business, I really want people to book a consultation. So, I have a consultation form that they fill out, that I'm getting in my email. And then I'm screening the people to make sure they're a good fit. And then I'm sending them a calendar invite to book a consultation. Now, that's not going to work for someone who's selling products, obviously. An e-commerce business is very different than a web design business or someone selling a service. So each business is going to be different in the way that they're converting clients or converting customers into making a purchase or taking an action.
Right. But yeah, I mean, to your point that the strategy should inform the design, right? Like in terms of what goes where and what's the story we're telling, what are we kind of encouraging people to do? I often run into this, and I'm sure, you get asked about social media, those types of things. Like, people will say like, oh, we really need to start doing social media. It's like, okay, but why? I don't know. It's everybody's doing it. Like, well, that's not strategy. Like social media is a tactic. Like it's a tool that we use, but like, why are you using it? And I'm wondering if you experience that, like with websites, like, do you see some real intent, or is it something that you really have to kind of coach people through?
I definitely have to coach people through it. A lot of people, I think, just know they need a website, but they're not sure why. So that's really where that, client intake or questionnaire comes in handy. Is I'm asking all of these questions that are really digging into the purpose of the website, who your clients are, why they're coming to the website, and really getting really down deep into your business and to identify what that strategy is going to be. That's where my job comes in, is to ask the right questions so that I can identify what the strategy is and determine what the ideal navigation and ideal calls to action and things are going to be for the website.
Yeah. Well, you've definitely given me a lot to think about in terms of how I think about kind of what I'm doing. So I mean, obviously you know what you're doing. You've got a lot of expertise in this, and I appreciate kind of what you shared. It's been really helpful. I want to transition just a little bit back into, we've kind of talked about, the work that you do. I want to talk a little bit about kind of the running the business side of it, and thinking a little bit more about like, you're a solopreneur. I'm a solopreneur. There's, it can be really lonely sometimes. So how do you leverage other business owners? How do you like kind of, what does being part of a business owner type community, how does that help you?
It's been really great for networking. I've joined several different organizations, especially since, I guess, COVID happened. I don't have the ability to get out and meet with clients or meet with other fellow entrepreneurs that I'm friends with that own their own businesses. So I've really had to look for other ways to connect with fellow solopreneurs or entrepreneurs, and make those connections and make those friendships and kind of really keep my name out in the community, but also just to have other business owners to identify with and talk strategy and discuss solutions to problems that we're having. Because, like you said, running a business is really hard, especially when you're doing it alone. You're the accountant, you're everything for the business. You're not just doing one thing, you're doing all the things all the time. It's not, a 9-to-5 job by any means. I was on vacation last week, but I was still working. So I don't think you're ever really off. So it's really nice to have those connections with people who have those same ideals and can identify with what you're going through.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point. Like, you're the accountant, you're the marketer,
Yeah,
the service provider, product creator, kind of, you run
everything. Like, there's so many titles you could, like, if you went back to apply for a job, you're like, sure, I qualify for this job, I qualify for that job, because you've done it all.
I've done pretty much all aspects. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a really great point. What has how have you surprised yourself as a business owner? I mean, as you just mentioned, like there's like you've kind of done it all. Is there anything that you've kind of tackled as a business owner that you never thought, like, I never thought I'd be able to do this? Or, like, kind of how have you surprised yourself as you've stepped into this role?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm definitely very much an introvert. So the dealing with client issues when, it's very rare that an issue comes up. But if an issue does come up, I'm not very good at dealing with that. So I've really had to kind of coach through those, how to deal with those problems. And also just project management. I'm very strategy oriented. I'm very good at project management, but the communication part of project management, again, being an introvert has been very difficult for me. So I've just had to remember, like, always over communicate and over deliver everything. And I think that's kind of the best advice I can give. Clients just want to know what's going on. And I've seen that from myself working with other businesses. I did a remodel on my house and I learned, like, I just want transparency and I just want to know what's going on with the project. If there's an issue, that's fine. Just tell me, like, tell me there's a delay in the project, or tell me, somebody didn't deliver what they were supposed to. And that's totally fine. Just be transparent about it.
Yeah. You'd rather know than not know.
Right.
Yeah, no, I mean, I appreciate that, right? Like, as you can't possibly prepare for all of the things that come in your general direction as a business owner. You just can't. You can't.
Yeah.
You can't. You even talked about, like, yeah, like you were educated in entrepreneurship, the six, right? But how could you possibly be prepared for all that was going to come your way? So I think that's a fun story. I want to give you kind of the final 30 seconds to talk about whatever it is that you want to talk about. And, for some that's like, oh, I want to talk about everything. And for others, it's like, oh man, what do I talk about? So, 30 seconds, take it away.
Well, I would just say, since COVID happened, I think websites are far more essential than even they've ever been in the past. So I'd say take a look at your website, take an assessment of your homepage. Think of it from the terms of where your customer's coming from instead of where you're coming from, and see if you can try to make that assessment and see if you can make some changes to your website. Just small changes can even make a better experience for your customers.
Yeah. So, some of the things you talked about are, thinking about their story, not your own story, but how does it tell their story, making action easy, and thinking about how do you kind of position things on your website so that they can see that story clearly. All of which is just really good advice. Michelle, this has been great. I really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to wrap up, but thanks so much. And I look forward to kind of sharing this story with others. So thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining the Charlotte podcast, and where we believe you need to show up to go up, grow yourself, to grow your business and your community. If you want to learn more about Charlotte, you can visit our website, which is iicharlotte.com. And remember, impact begins with II. We'll look forward to seeing you next